Good afternoon. It's 11 o'clock almost. The webinar is going to start soon. This is Greg Chambers. I will be leading this session, and I apologize if you hear work being done in the background. It's because some workers decided to show up, which is a good thing, but it's a bad thing that it's right now. But there may be some banging in the background. It's 11 o'clock. Thanks for coming. Today, we're talking about blowing up prospect awareness using audiences and lists. So, yeah, so let me get to where I can see what I'm talking about. We are going to talk. The first thing I wanted to share was I got this email yesterday, just by chance. I get a lot of emails, and this email came from an agency, and they were bragging about how they had helped the Idaho potato people become known as the Idaho potato people. So the agency is EHY down there. And so when I read the study, what jumped out to me is I was like, oh, this is exactly what we're going to be talking about tomorrow in the webinar. That they were trying to get potatoes in the news because it turns out that in 1991, when they did a survey, right, they ran some big, survey amongst people, consumers, and the consumers had no idea what Idaho potato was. What they didn't associate, they didn't think Idaho potatoes were any better than any other potatoes, which is funny to me because I only think of Idaho potatoes. So it's obviously worked on me. But this is the problem that they were trying to address, right? Is how do we change people's minds over time? Now, 1991 to today, long time. But in 2021, their next survey, the next survey that they did, showed that most consumers are looking for Idaho. Now, what they were highlighting, they've been, and this has been the agency on record, I guess, for the last 30 years. So they've been working on this problem. But they were advertising, I guess they were taking around this giant potato. This giant potato, they drove it from Idaho to New York City. And then in New York City, they weren't allowed in New York City because the potato is just too big. And then they got it on this barge and they pushed it around Manhattan. And so $30,000 was the cost of the campaign. 100 million impressions are what they advertised based on. That's what they were bragging about. For this $30,000, they were able to get 100 million impressions, most of those on TV and most of those in the New York City area. So they were able to, for less than 29 cents per thousand, they were driving their need. This is what we're talking about today. Like, how do we change somebody's mind? How do we get in front of our prospects and take them? Most of us are not doing something consumer related. Most of you, I assume, are business to business. That's the angle that I'm taking on this. But this is what we're going to be talking about today, is something along the lines of how do we get somebody to think that Idaho potatoes are where it's at. So today we'll talk about getting in front of prospects. Well, I'll give you, the way I'll organize this is 3 broad ideas for awareness to kind of frame what we're talking about. And then I'll give you 5 tactics on what it is that we're covering too. And then as always, there's a Q&A. The way we do the Q&A is through the chat. If you have questions, you can pop them in as we go along. If there's something that you really want me to cover, and I do not seem to be going that direction, you can put that in there too. This will be recorded and we'll send you a copy of it as we go along. But let's jump into what we're going to do. And then we'll cover next steps, what I would suggest as next steps to get started. So 3 broad ideas, that's the best place to start. And broad idea number 1 is, just like the Idaho potato people, you got to know where you're at today, right? So the way that they knew that that Idaho potatoes were not on anyone's mind is because they did consumer surveys. And in those consumer surveys, they found out, that the people surveyed were like, I don't know, Idaho potato, wherever else they grow potatoes, I don't know what the difference is. They're all the same to me, potato. What we're after, though, is the important part to me about that was that you don't know where you're at unless you know where you're at, right? So before you can start to move the needle, before you can figure out like where it is that you want to move to, you got to figure out where you are today. So if we know the future is that we want like all of our prospects to know about our particular product inside of a particular geography, or at least be aware of our brand name, our firm name, something along those lines. How do we start? One way is you can do like the Idaho potato people did. You can hire a firm. They should be able to do this kind of work. The other way to do it is you can hire an intern. You can hire an intern and get them in front of your target market with a set of survey questions and asking about it. The one thing I would caution against is a lot of interns these days just want to send out like a survey monkey survey. The better data does come from interviewing people, talking to them one after the other. So you could do that. You can also, what we use a lot is we use Google Analytics and especially Google Ads. So how do we use Google Analytics and Google Ads? We usually, whatever it is that we're trying to measure, we can put a marker out there on it. So if it's a company name, you can look for instances of your company name in Google Analytics. The more accurate one is to actually buy traffic on Google Ads. And so if you've heard these webinars before, you know that I bring this up on a regular basis. It's because it works. When you're buying traffic, you tend to, Google does tend to show you 100% of the traffic that is coming in. So when I put the ads together, even though some people fight against, like, I don't want to buy traffic to myself, but when we explain that we're using it as a measurement tool, and then you can see the cost of the clicks, it's a pretty inexpensive way to see, are you getting, like, is your product, the product name, your brand name, when you do, are people doing more searches on that because we know they turn to the search engines to get things going. So the first big idea, just to establish the framework, is we need to make sure that we know where we're at today so that we can see where, you know, how awareness grows as time goes on. The second big idea is party lists, first party lists. So you'll hear this a lot as if you've done anything with programmatic advertising or trying to load your list into audiences on Facebook or LinkedIn, Twitter, anywhere else that there is an audience, is they're after first party lists. And what they're talking about is not necessarily my little first birthday party planning list that I took off some poor lady's site. What we're talking about is it's your customer, your prospect list. And really those are the first places to start, because when you are trying to define who your other prospects are, the ones that aren't in there, the better your customer lists and prospect lists are, the more complete they are, and the more information you have on them, the better it's going to be. So what you're after is you're looking for lookalikes. Now I know that a lot of social media, or I see a lot of social media sites, Facebook advertises, hey, give us your list and we'll find all the lookalikes. And invariably when you load your list, right, your list is like, here's our targeted, 600 best types of customers that we've been able to dig up over the years, and you load it up into Facebook and they say, oh, we matched on less than 500, so we're not even going to show you what the match is. And then what are the lookalikes? And they say 5 million, and you think there's no way that there's 5 million people that are look-alike compared to what it is that I'm looking like. So when we do lookalikes at the beginning, we're Lead Gen Compass comes from Go Leads and US Farm Data, which are list companies. So we are big fans of third-party lists, compiled lists specifically. So when you're doing your lookalikes, doing manual matches on lookalikes, you will get more, you will get tighter matches when you finally get around to going online, if you use manual lists. The other lists, right, are second-party lists. So if first-party lists are your own prospects and customer lists that you've been able to cultivate yourself out of your own CRM, or your own efforts, your own associations that you belong to, et cetera. And lookalikes are the people that look most like the people that you want to do business with. Other people's lists are second party lists, and those are fantastic. We'll talk more about that as a tactic. But when you have there's usually, if you're targeting somebody, somebody else is targeting that person too. So if you can get those lists with your list, that's a great way to go. All before you use the robots, using the matching audiences. So again, and if what I'm saying is foreign to you, I apologize, but it's the when you load up your lists into a third party, an advertising platform, AdRoll, LinkedIn, Facebook are the ones that we use the most. When you load them up in there, because you're going to take advantage of their ad network by showing them ads to the matching people that are on those lists, breaking your lists into pieces of who your customers are, and using maybe even somebody else's list that is targeting the exact same people. By the time the robots get a hold of it, they do come up with some pretty good matches, and they learn some things at that point. So first party lists, though, are the most important thing to take away from this first bit. And why do I say compiled lists? That's a good question. The reason I say compiled lists are good and why we prefer those versus anything that's got a lot deeper information is because when list companies are compiling lists, they're trying to be broad, right? So they may only be a few inches deep, but they at least cover the entire territory. So when you can use that information, a lot of that gets modeled on the front end. So SIC code, like what industry they're in, how big the company is, information like that. When you are doing your matches on your list, it's a way to use a third-party list to make your first-party list a little bit bigger and give it more information. And so that's why I say do that manual before you move on to the robots. And then the last big broad idea I want to talk about is not TikTok as the social media platform, but TikTok as in time. And I don't know if any of you have ever bumped into this Will It Blend guy, but the Will It Blend guy is classic, right? The compound, what we're after, the big idea is that these things take time. We have done this ourselves, and we've bumped into clients who do this too, where we get all excited about a campaign and then we run it and nothing really seems to happen. And so we abandon it. One and done is the worst way to do a campaign, we've learned over time. And so this Will It Blend, if you've never bumped into this story, the potato one I just told you, right? I just showed you the 1991. They say they do the surveys. Nobody knows who Idaho potatoes is. 2021, and people prefer Idaho potatoes. They look for Idaho if they're buying a potato. I guess. For blenders, he did this for 15 years, and what he was doing is the advertising guys noticed that what the CEO of the company was doing was he would just grab random things, and as he was building these blenders, he was blending them. And so from that, they came up with this little campaign that they put on YouTube called Will It Blend. And Will It Blend, over the years, what ended up happening was, so that was 2006 is when he started that. And they would literally put anything in there. I think I bumped into it back then because they did an iPhone, and iPhones were buzzy around 2010. And that's when things started to take off. But they are at like 290 million views, I think is what I saw on their YouTube channel. It's a consumer related bit, but those views, like the fact that I even know about BlendTech blenders is because they stuck with this thing over time. And so of the three big ideas, this is the one that is hardest to usually get management behind because they want to see results right away. So that measurement piece at the front end works really well with this. When you know where you're at and you can start to see some progress as you're going along, it makes this approach work better. So these are the big broad ideas, right? The big broad ideas are measure. You got to know where you're at today in order to make sure that this type of awareness, these awareness campaigns, you can see that they're working towards the future. You need to get lists. So your internal lists, the better it is, the better matching, the more ways that we'll be able to find other people that are lookalikes to your customers online, and then use time to your advantage, right? Stick with these campaigns over time because they do make a difference. Most of us don't have 30 years with like Idaho potatoes to show results. So I'm guessing that agency showed results along the way. But like the BlendTech guys, right? If we're trying to make a name for ourselves, anything we can do to get out there and then stick with it. The stick with it-ness is probably the most important part when it comes to implementing these tactics. So next up, we'll jump into these 5 awareness tactics, but which are going to be a little more specific than the broad ideas. But the way that they all work is they work because we put measurements together. They work because uh, we're focused on the list and the quality of the list, and then trying to find lists that are just as good or better than our own lists, especially if we're just starting out. And then we're trying to use the element of time. So what we're going to talk about are these 5 things. We're going to talk about multiples, metrics, messes, matches, and minimums. A few of these are stretches because if you're going to do alliteration, that's just the way it goes, right? So let's talk about multiples. So this is tactic number 1, is multiples. And it is don't be the one and done, right? Be there. So I was going to give you another example. This is, and I hope this works. I'm going to share the sound on this crazy thing. If you're not from the Midwest, you maybe have never heard this. If you are from the Midwest, you've definitely have heard this. But my wife and I, were the work that's being done on the house, we had to run to the hardware store. One of the hardware stores in the Midwest is Menards. And as we're walking through Menards, my wife says, "Oh man, why do they keep playing this song?" And I'm like, it's because that's what they do. That's repetition, right? That's the thing. And this is from 1984.
Money at Menards.
Isn't that great? So 1984, the same guy, right?
Bandsaw, the contractor's table saw, or the jointer. Your choice, just $249 at all Menard locations. There's one near you.
Save big money at Menards.
So this got so bad that my daughter would sing the song to it. She'd sing along with it. This is 2019.
Save big money at Menards.
The old guy moved on, right? He passed away. But the point is that the reason that that works is because they never changed it, right? This has been 30, 40 years, 50 years that they're after it. So that consistency is what we're after. So the Menards guy, Ray, rest in peace. The when we are trying to build awareness again, so consumer, most of the business to business stuff that we do is just really we've got business to business has longer sales cycles than consumers, but at the same time, in the end, it's all the same thing, right? It's just consumers. If you can get in front of your audience and you can repeat the message over time, you learn things like, I know that I can save big money at Menards. And my wife knows without ever thinking about it, right? I think about this stuff all the time. She never thinks about it. So that's one, is use repetition to your advantage. The other one is metrics, right? What is the cartoon will make sense in a little bit. When we run metrics, right? So when we talk about the measurements, one of the hard parts about measurements is that most of the time we think about success, and especially when we're pitching to get funding for these campaigns, the idea is that, well, what if it works? I just need one sale, and one sale pays for this whole thing. There's a lot of that kind of success metric measuring going on before we start the campaign. But before we start the campaign, it's worth it to go through all the best guesses of what's going to happen. We use these. What is a home run? That's the obvious one. Well, if we get 10 sales and they're at our average first sale and then customer lifetime value, it's just a home run. It's a no-brainer. We'll move forward with it. What is then the next one down, which is nobody's really all that excited about it. We did it and we see maybe some flashes of success, but we didn't get any sales, for instance. Maybe we just got some other stuff. What is meh? We're going to keep working at it. And then what is a no-go? Where is it that it's so low? The results are so bad that even though Greg said that we need to do multiple, we need to stick to multiple mailings, for instance, and we just need to keep doing this. What is it that we see where nothing happens? And for mailers, we see this a lot. You just don't get any input, right? It's you send the mail out and then you don't know what, you don't get any phone calls that you can directly attribute back to the mailing. You didn't get any orders. You didn't get much return. You got a few pieces of return mail, so the thing went out because there was some, address failures. But what is it that we're measuring? A lot of times what we're doing is this is where we're using Google Analytics, right? We're using how many visits, did we see an uptick in visits to the website? Did we see any sort of activity? And if we can't see it anywhere, then that's when it gets dumped. The other key part to metrics is not just having them and knowing what it is that you're after. We're here and we're trying to get a lift. We're trying to double it. We're trying to triple it over time. And what do we think that that's worth to us? But probably the biggest key is that you share it with everyone, share it with your vendors, especially. Um, it's interesting to me, as when we share with vendors what it is that we're after and how it is that we're going to be measuring their success, oftentimes they come up with some pretty clever ideas that we wouldn't have thought of, or especially if we're engaging them for something specific. They can come up with some new things because they're like, oh, if that's what you're after, and that's how I'm going to earn your business long term, maybe we should do something like this. Maybe we should put a big potato on a truck and drive it to New York, drive it from Idaho, from Boise to New York City. Um, Whatever it is, the reason that, like Buddy the Elf, you want to share it with everyone is because the more people who know what it is you're after, it's kind of like committing to a weight loss goal publicly or something. The more people that are after it, the more people that will start to try to help you uh, get that goal. Whereas the everyone, a lot of times the everyone is just internally, right? This is the measurement that we're after. And then this is when we're pulling it and this is how we're pulling it. And you will find your team can do some things for you internally as well as externally. So that's tactic number 2. Tactic number 3, messes. So this is one of my alliterations that doesn't, it's really problems, right? Your customers have problems that your products solve, right? One of the sayings that we have internally is we say um, that a solution by itself has no value by itself, right? Just in and of itself, there's no value in our solutions. They derive their value from the problems that they're solving or the results that they're helping somebody achieve. So knowing that when your customers are looking for problems and it's your problem that you solve, you should probably be there on Google. And the reason is because we know people use Google, they use it a lot. So if we can be there, um, those impressions, even if you don't get clicks, right? So a lot of traditional uh, AdWords advertising is somebody types something in, your ad shows, you get the click, and then out of 100 clicks, you get one purchase, and that's how people measure the success of AdWords. We actually use this a lot. So this is just a car won't get into reverse, right? So a sample search like a transmission shop. So if you were a transmission shop and you work inside of a 3 or 5 mile area, that's about where people are going to drop their cars off for you. Anytime anybody in that area, right, that trade area, is searching for anything around these car problems, these transmission problems that that you fix, it would be great to be there as a for instance. And you can start to see just when you type it in, these are all the searches that Google comes up with. The sample searches, right? The car won't reverse or drive, car won't reverse when it's cold, car won't reverse when it goes forward. It doesn't really matter what it is. When it's, again, when it's, if you're like in this guy's case, when he's targeting a specific area, if there's anybody in there that's searching around these problems, even though they might not be ready to fix it, you at least want your transmission shop to show up. And the reason is because we get something like this. Like this is a campaign from US Farm Data, but it has 1,000 clicks in the month of July. And, we had a bunch of conversions off of that. So we're paying $3.12 a conversion in there. So we paid 600 bucks roughly, but we also paid 600 bucks to be around 51,000 of these impressions. And when you go look at um, the times that our ad was shown and we did not get a click, but you look at the keyword term inside of search terms as to what the ad was showing on, those are our people, right? The people that are looking for like lists of dairy farms or how do I get emails of farmers or things like that. And that 51,000 a month, right? That whatever that 600,000 a year, a million, close to a million times a year that we can be in front of people that are looking for something around farm and lists. Those things add up in our favor too, right? It's great to get the low cost per click and the conversions on that side, but oftentimes we see success just being around the problem, where you can start to see a little bit of an audience awareness uptick. So that's a place to be too. All right, so if we did multiples, right, you need to not just do a one and done. These campaigns use time to your advantage and hit people with the same message over and over again. Don't change your message 100 times. And then the other one is, know what success looks like before you start, and also know what failure looks like before you start. And then this last one, or this last one that we just did, was knowing about the problems, like searching around problems that where people are at and making sure that you have impressions there of who it is that you're looking for. This one is joint ventures. So I've been listening a lot to Yacht Rock. Yeah, the satellite radio station. One of my friends turned me onto it, and it's from my childhood. So I love all these songs. One of them is the stupid Pina Colada song. If you like Pina Coladas, I think it is something else. The right the But if you remember the story, I think the song was called Escape. But if you remember the story, right, the story is that the guy goes to he and his old lady are starting to get boring, and he's looking for a way to get out of this relationship. And so he puts an ad in the paper. He responds to an ad in the paper, and this person likes pina coladas, and then he shows up, and guess what? It's his lady. It's his own loving lady, and he didn't know that she liked pina coladas. You're uh, there are other customer companies that are targeting the same prospects you are, and doing joint work with them works really well. So if you're not the only one trying to reach them, you you find out who they are just by asking your customers, right? If you ask your customers where they're writing checks to and the vendors that they appreciate the most, those are the same people that you can approach and see if there would be some sort of non-competitive, sure, you're competing for that customer's wallet, but at the same time, if you guys are both sharing that customer, there's probably other customers that you could be sharing too. And can you do joint ventures? So what is a joint venture that increases your impressions? Um, we worked with the Hawaiian shirt company, the fabled Hawaiian shirt company that is most of my examples. And with the Hawaiian shirt company, what we did a joint venture with was a cruise reseller. They were like I forget what they were called, but they did basically resold seats on cruise lines, and then another one who resold vacation spots at a resort in Mexico. And so the tropical shirt company, the Mexican village that was they were selling seats in, and then the cruise company, we all got together and shared lists. Now the tropical shirt company only had a list of about 4,000 customers. The Mexican resort had like 7,000, and then the cruise company had the most. It was like 17,000. But then we got together, promoted one contest um, with all of them, and everybody increased their list size. So that was the important part of it, is that there were at least 1,000 new people that got added to each other's lists that weren't on the list before, but generally fit that same psychographic, right? They were all people who like the same things in general. If we should have had the pina colada company, somebody who sold pina coladas would have worked well inside that too. But finding people who are targeting your same customers and then approaching those companies and looking for joint ventures, they don't always work out, but when they do, um, they work pretty well. So finding matches. Um, minimum. So the fifth one I have for you as we're going through this morning is minimum, which is also a tough one, because what I really mean is keep it small, keep it narrow. One of the challenges that everybody has is that we do a lot of stuff, right? We solve a lot of problems. We need to help our customers understand who we are by focusing on being around single problems, single products, um, or single issues, like just firm awareness. So we use this rule of 30 internally to help us stay focused on this, which is every single message, just one message for it to get through. The old adage was, only 1 out of 9 messages get through, or something like that. 1 out of 7 messages, they need to hear it 7 times before they register it, was the thought. So we bumped that up to 10, because we're like, it's just, there's a lot of messages. So you need to hear it 10 times. That's one message, right? You got to save big money at Menards. I got to hear that 10 times before it registers with me once. But in order for all that messaging to get through, right, to compete with Lowe's and Home Depot and everybody else that sells hardware, Ace, I almost need to plan on getting that message in front of my prospect 30 times. So that's the rule of 30 on there. The Our challenge, right, is that you can't explain everything. You can't teach everybody everything about your business. So you need to pick something that you want to be known for, that you can learn to be known for, and and focus on that. And so I use this clarity circles drawing where the middle of the clarity circle, right, is uh, how strong is your message. So your message is strongest when it's uh, when it's a few things, um, where you're not talking about a lot of things and you're doing it over and over and over again, right? So if repetition is on the left, or I'm sorry, on the Y, and how many times people are hearing about it is on the X and Y. This is kind of an adopted graphic, so it doesn't it makes less sense that I'm looking at it now than it did when I first thought of it. Because I was like, oh yeah, this is just like clarity circles. Clarity circles. What I was trying to explain here is that the more you're, the more you diffuse your message, the less clear it is, right? And that's really an internal thing where internally, if we're trying to get something done, you kind of need a couple people who know exactly what is going on and what needs to get done. Because by the time they've told it, like a game of telephone, by the time they've told it to the 100th person, the 100th person is uh, getting a really distilled version of what it is that we're all trying to do. So the clearer you are at the beginning, which is why we use, when we set strategy, we set strategy with just a couple people. um, it works better than if you try to get everybody involved. I'm in a big organization and they're trying to get everybody involved in the strategy part. And I'm like, yeah, this is not it's not the way it works, because it gets too diffused. You need a couple people to pick the vision, the spot that we're going to, and then everybody can be involved in planning, right? Everybody can figure out how to get there. But I need to know where it is that we're going in order for that to work. So where that applies in these tools is, um, that, right? Take a single message before you plug it in. So a quick review of these three big ideas and the five tactics along the way, right? So measuring before you do anything in these tools, before you do anything with display advertising, and trying to raise awareness, uh, it really helps to know where you're at today and where you want to go in the future. It helps to have your lists dialed down and that you're trying to build matches manually before you use these tools to help find new prospects for you. The robots, the AI robots, will find new prospects for you, but the more dialed in you are on the front end. An example I had, that I was going to tell you about, is the Google, on Google Ads, has some really cool AI tools. And so we were consulting with the client, and they uh, had used it, they had turned it on, and it's basically, it's kind of set it and forget. It's really cool, right? You just say like, this is who we're after. This is about, the things that they're interested in. This is how I'll know it's working, because, a contact form has been submitted, and it will start solving for that problem, right? Here's the general audience and here's the goal that they're after. And it gets there. It was working, but the more we looked into like how it was working, what the robot was solving for was the company name. So uh, people who search for Greg Chambers were more likely to fill out the contact form. So therefore, all the ad budget was getting pushed towards Greg Chambers, which is not what we were after, right? That's not what they were after. So you need to be careful with those audience tools. And the way you do that is you just do some manual work on it first, and then give yourself some time for this to happen. So the way to think about it is the end of 2022. By the end of 2022, where is it that we need to be? And then the way we get there is we're going to have a lot of messages, right? I'm going to I'll get in front of people as many ways as I can. I'm going to, before we embark and spend too much money, I'm going to not only know what success is, which is really easy for most of us to define, but I'm going to know what not success is and where I cut the thing off before I get too involved in it. I'm going to take advantage of the fact that people are on AdWords, or doing ad searches. It's not called AdWords anymore, Google Ads, but they're using search engines searching for problems. And I'm going to try to be around there too, because a lot of these impressions will help there. And then with the matches, I'm going to see if there's anybody else who I can join forces with to do some things like a webinar, for instance. So you could do a joint webinar where you advertise it to each other's audience, and then whoever registers for it, that's the list that gets shared back and forth to everybody. That works pretty well. And then the minimums just is really just aiming small. We're not going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to talk about the minimum that we can to get people to understand what it is that we're talking about. Now I get to this point of this, and I think to myself, Greg, have you just done this where you've talked about all these things and you haven't really described the ad platforms that we're talking about? The ad platforms that we're talking about are Facebook, LinkedIn, and we use a company called AdRoll. And between those three, they allow you to take audiences and roll the audience up. So if you have a prospect list of 10,000, um, you can put it into a company like AdRoll, for instance. It'll match on email, and then it will say, we've matched on 6,000 of those. 50% is a good number to think about. Well, now you have 5,000 people that are online that they've found a match for, and then you're going to run ads to those people. And that's how you're going to lift awareness. So when we talk about blowing up awareness, um, that's really what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to take this audience where we're saying, it's not just it's all carpenters. It's all carpenters, with under 10 employees in the Midwest is who we're targeting, because we've got a new nail gun, or a new Menards has a new program. And so as we're looking for those people, if we have a bunch of their emails, if we have some lists of them, we want to get those online, and we want to start running ads to them, making them aware of our new solution, our new product, as well as the product solves something, right? If it's a buying program, what are the problems that it solves? And if anybody is searching in those areas for these problems related to my target audience, which usually we see like, they might use keywords like carpenters, like finance programs for carpenters, or ways to customer financing, buy now, pay later, financing for carpenter customers of small carpenters. If people are looking for those things, in general, they will be if you're trying to present the problem out to them. And then you can be there and make sure that your ad is showing to them, but just to them. It's not showing to me, it's showing to them. So, wow. Like I said, I like to keep these between 35 and 40 minutes. We're right there. So what are the next steps? The first next step is just what do your prospects need to know about before the end of 2022? If you have a project, that's the place to start. Is, we're rolling out a new product, we're going into a new territory. I'm trying to think of some of the things that we've talked to people about. A lot of new territories, a lot of building awareness for new products. We're trying to, a new line. We're carrying a new line. We're doing some of that stuff. So how would we figure out what they know today, right? That's the next thing. What data do we have on hand that's telling us where we are today? Sales is one form of data. It's a little bit, if we say leading and lagging, it's a little bit at the end of the process. So are there any things that lead up to it? Proposals come before sales, inquiries come before proposals, right? So are we measuring any of those things where we can keep track of where it is today, and then we can kind of set a number for, if this is working, this is where it will be tomorrow. And then it is always a good experience to kind of do a, why bother exercise. What is the value of the difference? Like if we're here today and then we want to be here tomorrow, like, why are we going through this? Why are we going to do this? And sometimes it's obvious. Other times when you start doing the numbers, it's like, we could just keep doing the thing that we're doing and we'll get there eventually, but it's not worth investing in, versus maybe using another product and pushing that forward. So the next steps are really internal, right? You don't need to do anything other than, I guess the thing I probably left off this is you should gather those lists, right? Start working on cleaning up those lists internally, making prospecting lists. Where are your best lists? In general, your best lists are in accounting. So inside of QuickBooks, inside of, like, that is generally the most accurate information where we can find it of not only who the people are and where they reside and what the contact names are and what their, maybe even what their titles are, but what it is that they bought. And so you can start to build a little bit of a good, better, best customer list based on that. And then prospect list too, right? Old customers, as well as people that have not sold. And you can start to match these things across back and forth. So that would be a great place to start. And again, Lead Gen Compass, this is what we do. This is what we do every day. And so you will probably hear from Les or Christian, who are going to be following up just in case there is something. If you could tell us what you need more of, uh, that's usually all we need to get started, because we can help with lists, managing budgets, doing some of that good stuff. So this has been how to blow up prospect awareness using audiences and lists, and hopefully it made sense to you, because I have been up early. It's like that Chris Farley skit on SNL. I've been in the basement all morning, drinking 4 pots of coffee, ready to go. Not exactly sure what I said. Um, it looks like I don't have any questions. If you have comments, reach out to us. My name is Greg Chambers, and you'll probably hear from either Les or Christian along the way. Thanks for your attendance, and I will stop the sharing. I'm still here. I'm live. This was direct. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Helene. Thanks for attending. And if you have other questions I didn't answer, by all means, feel free to reach out. And have a great week.